Okay, well, hello everybody out there on Zoom. Welcome to the December 2022 SANDAG Modeling Forum. And we're very glad that many of you have chosen to attend on Zoom. We're still waiting for a few in-person guests, but I think we'll go ahead and get started. And I think we'll get started this morning by having our data science director, Dr. Cynthia Burke, give some opening remarks.
Hi, everybody. I hope everybody, it's so weird. I need to have like one of the people who are in the room to go sit so I can look at them. Look forward to this whole RSV, flu, COVID episodes being done. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I can't believe it's December. Our modeling team has been very busy, and I know you have a lot of updates on the agenda today regarding the regional plan update, improvements to the model and our work on the 2025 regional plan, as well as where we are with Service Bureau projects. But just a big shout out to everybody that we work together with. We're grateful for your collaboration and partnership and understanding where we are having to refocus some of our modeling efforts, and we wish we weren't in this situation, but we appreciate your patience and looking forward to our ongoing collaboration. And I believe this is also Bargov's first modeling forum, who we're going to be very excited to introduce you to, who's one of our new leaders in the transportation modeling group. So thank you for being here today and your continued support. We're grateful for you, and we hope you have a great holiday season.
Thank you, Cindy.
Well, thank you, Cindy. So let me start with saying that it's so glad to see so many new and familiar faces on Zoom. So we always appreciate your effort attending this important kind of vehicle that it's a very important platform for us to communicate with the community, right? So as Cindy mentioned, that there are a lot of heavy lifting work, right now, and also in the past year, we had quite a lot of staff changes, so, but it's my pleasure. First, I want to formally introduce Joaquin taking over the coordinator's position for the modeling forum. So many of you are familiar with Mike Kalanja. He retired. Thank you, Joaquin, for taking over the responsibility. So second, I want to introduce three staffs joined us in the last 6 to 7 months. Let's start with Bargov. Bargov, I know you're on Zoom, right? Do you mind turn on your camera and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am Bhargav Sana. I joined SANDAG just about a month ago as the manager of regional models for model development. I have had more than 10 years experience developing advanced activity-based models, and also more recently worked on developing data visualization and reporting systems for activity-based model outputs. And I'm very excited to join the SANDAG modeling team.
Thank you, Bhargav. Next, Dr. Nimesh, do you mind introduce yourself?
Hello, this is Nimesh Dharmadikari. I've just joined SANDAG in July, and I'm working on various projects right now, so very happy to join. Thank you.
Thank you, Nimesh. And last but not least, Michael.
Hello, my name is Michael Ohrmeyer. I am a relatively recent graduate. This is my first position as a transportation modeler and data scientist. I've been working on a number of projects, and like Nimesh, it's been great, and I'm really excited to keep working on these projects. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nimesh. So with that, Joaquin, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about the new SANDAG website.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Wu. As you all may or may not be aware, we do have a new website at SANDAG, and there's been a lot of time and effort that the staff here at SANDAG and in various divisions have put into getting the website live. So we'd like to remind you all that that is available. The main website is still the same address, but the transportation modeling section is under a new link. And a lot of the splash pages that might send you to TFIC or the SB 743 map or other resources that you all may be familiar with, those links have remained the same, but again, those splash pages have changed their address. So if you have a moment today, feel free to maybe peruse the new website. Feel free to contact me directly if you're having any issues. I know we've had a couple of stakeholders and individuals who normally access TFIC and the SB 743 website have some trouble finding it. So if you have any trouble, please reach out to us. And for anything related to the new website, I know that the teams that were involved in it are eager to hear any feedback and make any improvements that they'd like to have. So thanks for that. And I think without further ado, I think we're going to get right into our program, and we're going to have Ing provide an update to the regional plan.
Thanks, Joaquin. Hi, everyone. My name is Ing Ouyang. I'm the manager of regional models for model application and analysis. So today I'm going to talk about the 2021 regional plan amendment update. So on September 23rd this year, Board of Directors voted to prepare a focused amendment to the regional plan without the regional road usage charge, the ROC. Also update the revenue assumptions, prepare supplemental EIR, and also complete work within 1 year for board consideration. So we got the marching order. So we already started the work. So I wanted to highlight the differences between the regional plan and the amendment. So in terms of the Series 14 regional growth forecast, the amendment will use DS42, which includes employment allocation correction. So there's a few hospital or casino, there's activity centers that the employment got updated. So the total regional employment remained the same, but at the smaller geography level, they vary a little bit compared to the data source 38, which is the one that we used for the regional plan. Also, population distribution got adjusted at the micro zone level as well, because once we rerun the population and employment model, that got readjusted a little bit. But the total population at the CTCPA and the jurisdiction level, they remain the same. So the variation is only at the smallest geography level, MGI. So in terms of the ABM2 version, for the amendment, we actually use a slightly updated 14.2.2 due to the a bug fix for the cross-border model. And then, for the ROC, for the amendment, there's no ROC. But in the 2021 regional plan, the ROC starts in 2030 and all the way to 2050. We're going to take questions at the end? Or?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So if you have any questions, we're going to take questions at the end. So in terms of the model runs involved for the amendment, so I listed out on the slide, the base year 2016 is a very important one. We need to make sure the validation is still valid. Also the 2035 and 2050, that's, especially 2035 is for the SB 375 GHG per capita from reduction from the 2005 level, the target. We have the 19% target. And then for the air quality conformity years, 2023, 26, 29, and 40, as well as 50, we need to meet the federal air budget, air quality budget, yeah. And then besides that, then there's also supplemental EIR no project, which includes 2035 and 2050. We're also going to rerun the EIR alternatives. There's alternative 2 and 3, and potentially looking at some other alternatives as well. So once the model runs are all completed, we're going to produce the performance measures for all of the key model runs, and also generate the emission outputs for air quality conformity. We're also going to have go through the internal and external quality control and review. Yeah, so that's very important part of the process. I'd like to thank the modeling team that worked so hard on this. Yeah. So the next step is to complete modeling of the different scenarios and the peer review results and initiate air quality conformity with federal agencies, prepare the supplemental EIR for public review in the spring, Board of Directors consideration in the summer. So we will present the modeling results in the late January Board of Directors meeting, or January 27th will be presenting the modeling results. Okay, I think this concludes my update to the amendment.
And Nimish, do we have any questions or individuals requesting to ask a question? Okay, maybe we'll pause just for a little bit in case folks have questions.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, if you do have any questions related to any of the agenda items presented,
Well, I think
yes, I think we do have one.
Yeah, we have a hand raised from Anne.
Oh, so I was just curious, when you say internal and external QA, QC, and peer review, could you elaborate a bit on what that means?
Okay, yeah, so the internal review is our modeling team. So we have several modelers running the model, and then we're going to have people who did not run the model to review the results. So that's we consider as internal modeling review. The external is including we actually have a division that's focused on data quality, and so their team are going to also review our outputs. Yeah, so we have this formal PRP, peer review process. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that it's, SANDAG strive to be a data-driven agency, right? We want to make sure, at least from the modeling perspective, all the number we provide is accurate as possible. So the reason we have internal kind of QA/QC is because a lot of number we produce requires domain knowledge in transportation modeling. So we kind of divided our team in two parts, people who are responsible for running the model. And the second part is people for, just an independent part of the team to review the setup and also look at the numbers, make sure everything makes sense, right? So, and then after we pass internal review, we go through a formal PRP process. That's the just for the just trying to provide the best quality of the data to the stakeholders. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I think with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item. However, if any of you all have questions about anything presented today or any questions in general, feel free to put them in the chat and we will address them between agenda items. The next agenda item will be presented by Bhargav Sana, and it's a roadmap to the 2025 regional plan. And Bhargav is going to be presenting this via Zoom.
Thank you, Joaquin. Good morning, everyone. As introduced earlier, I'm Bhargav Sana. I'm the manager of regional models for model development. I'm very excited to join the SANDAG modeling team and embark on this journey to update all of our models and get that ready for our next regional plan, RP 2025. Next slide, please. Here is a high-level roadmap of all the model development work that is planned. Note that there are several efforts that need to progress in parallel so that all of them are done by our target date of May 2024. And that is when we plan on finishing and testing all of our development work and getting the model ready for application. I will give you a quick update on where we are at. The good news is everything is proceeding as per plan so far. I'll be starting from the bottom left. and working my way through to the top right. You probably know that the cross-border model was recently updated under the Activity Sim framework. It has been also updated with information from the 2019 cross-border survey data. The next set of milestones that are planned to be completed by the end of this fiscal year are the Rapid Strategic Model, also called RSM, and an update to TCOVED, our network management system. RSM is currently progressing well with an MVP version, or a minimum viable product version, that is to be finished by the end of this year. The performance of that and evaluation is going to guide us, help improve the MVP version further. As far as TCOVED is concerned, we are currently working with the contractor to finalize the scope and schedule for upgrading our network management system to what we are calling TNED, the Transportation Network Editing Database. By the end of next year, we also plan to scope and finish updating other auxiliary tools, such as the off-model calculator and the benefit cost tool. By spring 2024 is when we are going to see all of this come together. We are currently procuring contractor services for updating our commercial vehicle and truck model. This project would ideally start before next spring and finish in about 1 year. We are aiming to update our commercial vehicle model to a state-of-the-art system that can account for last mile delivery services such as Amazon Parcels, Uber Eats, Instacart, etc. The development of ABM3, which is the next version of our activity-based model, is well underway already. The resident models and the airport model have already been migrated to the Activity Sim framework. The conversion of the visitor model and other auxiliary models is progressing as we speak. Another important task that has recently started is the preparation for updating all the choice models in ABM3. These models will be updated using the household travel survey that has been collected earlier this year. A comprehensive model calibration and validation will follow with 2022 as the base year. Another key effort that has recently started, but will be working through a good chunk of next year, is updating our database and reporting processes for ABM3. This includes procedures for deriving performance measures for RP 2025, and we are rethinking about the whole system to develop something that is as streamlined and as efficient as possible. Once all of these efforts begin to wrap up, we plan on conducting a peer review for our completely updated model system. Next slide, please. As you all know, data are the bread and butter of transportation models. As mentioned earlier, we are planning to designate 2022 as the base year for the updated models. Since we are coming out from a global pandemic that disrupted travel and activity patterns in an unprecedented fashion, we are being very thoughtful about gathering the most up-to-date data that can reflect post-pandemic travel behavior and sensitivities. Several major survey data collection efforts are concluding this year. Parking survey data, household travel survey data, and commercial vehicle survey data are the three major data collection efforts. Most of these data have already been collected, and we are going through QA, QC, and post-processing steps to get these ready for model estimation. Next year, we will also be focusing on gathering a whole set of data sources that will be used in the calibration and validation of the model system. We plan on augmenting traditional count databases with big data sources. Some of those have been presented in the last modeling forum earlier this year. transit onboard survey is a significant effort that will also be undertaken next year. You'll see that most of the data collection effort is going to be wrapped up well before the May 2024 target date. That is definitely needed, considering that all of this needs to go into the updated models that have been shown on the previous slide. With that, I think I will conclude my update and take any questions.
Thank you, Bhargav. Wondering if we have any questions? I think we have one.
Yeah, so Maurice from Caltrans has a question about the ROC. Is it possible to compartmentalize the ROC such that it could be function as a toggle for modeling purpose? Yes, that's the case.
Yes.
Yeah, then let me just explain a little bit more. So whether the ROC is in our next plan or not is yet to be decided. So just speaking from the pure technical perspective, there's a compartmentalized or chart trips by purpose that should be doable based on the new model design. Yeah, thank you for the great question, Maurice.
Okay, we'll have a short pause to see if there's any other questions. Okay, well, with no further questions on that agenda item, I'm going to allow Nimish to sit up front here. And I think Nimish is going to give his presentation from his seat. So Nimish Dharmadhikari, Dr. Nimish Dharmadhikari is going to be presenting now.
Thank you, Joaquin. Welcome, everybody. I will present a small update about Service Bureau. So as Ying mentioned, we presented some options to the Board of Directors in the meeting on September 23rd, 2022, out of which board selected an option which was focused on amendment with a supplemental CEQA analysis. This involved estimated time of around 12 months, and its impact on Service Bureau projects was estimated to be 6 to 7 months delay. So since after the board's decision on September 23, modelers and planners regrouped to discuss the path forward and reprioritize the project work. We sent a memo to active Service Bureau clients, those were in the queue, and we also started reaching out to individual clients for one-on-one conversations. We also commenced our amendment runs, as he mentioned, and we have presented into the IT, transportation capacity, and mobility task force about path forward and options that consultants and jurisdictions can take. This will be explained a little bit more in the following slides. This is a sample slide which is showing the list of active Service Bureau clients that are presently in the queue. We sent a memorandum to these clients. And this is the example of a memo we sent to the jurisdiction and consultants in the queue. It briefly mentions the board decision and potential delays to the Service Bureau projects. The major part of this presentation is a general Service Bureau workflow. This highlights the dependencies that are on the SANDAG's ABM and servers. So the first part is study the workspace and scenario creation, which is done via ABM workspace and scenario tool, and it is available on SANDAG servers. The network editing and zone splitting is done with the in-house TKWED network editing software. Currently, it is not available on the modeling servers. It is only available onto specific machines which supports ArcInfo workstations. The third step will be land use converter. It is done via land use converter tool, and it is available on servers, and it is developed as a separate tool. The next step is actual run the model, which is done with the ME software, and it is available on servers. And last step is the reporting and procedures and analysis, out of which some of the analysis and procedures are required to use the SQL database, and it is not available to the external users right now. So many of these procedures can be replicated onto the other machines or servers. Some steps have to rely on the SANDAG servers, but there can be workaround. For example, network edits, which are performed with the TCOVED, can be performed using ME, or reports can be generated using Python scripts instead of SQL scripts, so which can be developed afterwards. The options we presented in the IT meetings for the Service Bureau clients were option 1 was the wait for the regional plan amendments to be completed in additional 6 months. Option 2 was work with the consultants to develop independent procedures, and which will be customized for individual clients or jurisdictions. And last option was provided limited option access to the SANDAG servers on contract basis. As of at this point, we actually contacted the ME and Bentley, the owner of the ME, but option 3 looks not feasible because there are some legal and contracting hurdles with the Bentley systems. So we think that option 2 is the most useful for right now. There are some pros and cons for this option. Pros being clients can distribute their work and not rely on SANDAG's constraints such as staffing and server resources. It will incorporate more flexibility with reporting and summarization, and it will also create a bench of consulting firms with ABM expertise. There are some cons to this approach. Will require consulting firms to develop their own modeling workflow and reporting procedures, and they will also need to set up their SANDAG ABM on their end. Thank you.
Thank you, Nimish. We'll see if there's any hands raised or any questions in the chat.
Don't see.
Okay.
It's a very quiet group today. Normally we see a little more questions, so yeah, speak up if you have any questions, please. Thank you.
Okay. I think
There is a question about timeline.
yes.
So can you clarify, Anne, can you clarify your question? What do you mean by timeline? Are you talking about a service bureau?
Yes, thank you. I thought I heard at the beginning of the overall presentation that the 6 to 7 month timeline may not be as long of a delay as originally anticipated. That was what I was asking about.
Yeah. So Anne, let me take the question. So the 6 to 7 months, based on the board decision, the 6 to 7 months delay on the Service Bureau application jobs put us at the second quarter of 2023. That's the time it's scheduled to, we open up the capacity to help with the Service Bureau clients projects again, the initial run of the RPMN runs went forward relatively well last month. So we started talking to the projects on the top of the queue to start working on that. However, so recently we have a little bit kind of hiccups on the model runs. Right now it's being discussed, how can you reprioritize our RP amendment run needs and the client jobs, but I'm relatively confident by probably second quarter next year, the capacity of the SANDAG modeling team is going to open up for Service Bureau jobs.
Thank you.
Also of note, we will be making the slides for this entire modeling form available on the SANDAG transportation modeling website after the meeting. So if you have any questions about that, hopefully that will address that. But again, any questions that come up, please let us know and feel free to put them in the chat. Excellent. So I think this brings us to our final agenda item for the day, and probably the longest one. And so I'm going to be discussing our induced demand methodology that we used in the 2021 regional plan, which we're still working on the amendments. So the final results are still to be determined. But very generally speaking, induced demand is the phenomenon by which after the supply of a good increases, more of that good is consumed due to the decrease in price. This is consistent with the standard economic model of supply and demand. While induced demand technically refers to newly generated demand, popular discussion around induced demand for transportation has made it practically synonymous with induced travel. And that's a similar concept that discusses substitution effects and possible mode shifts. In the context of highway capacity, supply can be thought of as lane miles. Consumption of the good that can be thought of as traveling along the highways, and price can be thought as the time spent traveling or the cost of traveling. The way that induced demand is quantified is via elasticity. No off-model adjustments were made to the 2015 Regional Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. And after feedback from the California Air Resources Board on our technical evaluation of that plan in 2015, they did recommend strongly considering applying an adjustment factor to our SB 375 VMT in our next regional plan, which happened to be our 2021 regional plan. Historically, the SANDAG Research Division has acknowledged the concept of induced demand and induced travel dating as far back as 2004. Documentation for the four-step travel model specifically has a section that discusses induced travel. And I think the big change that we made heading into this last regional plan was that we're acknowledging that the model does not account for a portion of induced demand effects. So that is the datum in which we started out at when we approached this regional plan. So the components that we tried to break this concept down into were short run versus long run induced demand, the existing tools and research that is present for us to take a look at, and then taking a look at the components of roadway expansion in the 2021 regional plan, which differs substantially from previous regional plans that the region has had. We then did some bespoke tests using ABM2+ to further hone down our methodology that we thought was appropriate for the plan and for this approach. We determined these elasticities based on a variety of factors that we're going to discuss in this presentation. And then we finally created an analysis tool that actually calculated that VMT and additional greenhouse gas that we would add to our SB 375 evaluation. So elasticity can be broken down into short-run elasticity and long-run elasticity. Short-run elasticity refers to changes in travel behavior that take place due to added utility on the network. This may affect trip length, trip path, the frequency of trips, the time of day in which trips are made, and maybe the location or destination of those trips. Long-run elasticity reflects changes to longitudinal household choices or public policy due to added utility on the network. This may affect work, home, or school location choice, as well as household auto ownership levels, and it can also have effects on population, land use policy, or facilities management. And the reason how come our breakdown of short-run and long-run induced demand is using a lot of serrated lines and gradients is because there really isn't a whole lot of existing research that can draw that line of where short-run induced demand starts and where long-run induced demand starts. And we're also not exactly sure at the moment, although we did have to make some evaluations for this regional model, of how much is captured by travel models in the short run and how much of that long-run induced demand is captured by our growth forecast and land use alternatives. So the induced demand components in ABM, again, can kind of be broken out into these short run and long run components. And so the effects that we see on the left column, which have to do a lot with the different activities and the way that the model handles travel, are there on the left. And again, it's the same concepts that we discussed in the previous slide, but also adding things like transponder ownership for tolls, and maybe land use policy and home location. And on the right side, we see kind of how that's covered in ABM via either operations like skimming and traffic assignment, all the way down to the auto ownership model and the other submodels that go into the overall transportation modeling suite that we use. And there near the bottom of the table, the growth forecast is probably one of the biggest inputs that we have that we take kind of as is and use with the model. So for existing tools and research, there is a tool that you all may be familiar with online. It's from the National Center for Sustainable Transportation and the University of California at Davis. It's an induced demand calculator that is accessible by a web-based tool. I think the greatest advantage of this is that it's very intuitive for all different types of individuals to use and learn about this phenomenon. It is a regression-based analysis that at its very basic core basically says, for every 1% increase in lane mileage compared to the inventory of what you have to your base year, you should expect a 1% increase in VMT. That basis is based on mostly from literature from Duranton and Turner from 2012. And it is basically a one-way causality for, and they covered it all in vehicle kilometers traveled. And they do arrive at these values, not exactly at 1.0, but for the purposes of the calculator, they do round to 1.0. So to discuss this tool a little bit further, we do have the elasticity formula there and a screenshot from the calculator that can be used, I believe, for every MSA statewide. And so to cover kind of the contrasts from the tool versus the amount of VMT that we're being asked to calculate for the regional plan, it does use annualized additional VMT. And so our model kind of covers, a typical weekday VMT. It does have a 2016 base year, which was very fortuitous. Just happens to be the base year of ABM 2+. It uses elasticity of 1.0 and 0.75, depending on the federal functional class that we'll go into in the next slide. It is limited to the addition, the construction of new general purpose or HOV lanes only. That HOV lane provision was just added in the past year. So when we were developing this tool and developing this methodology in the winter of 2020 during the pandemic, the documentation for this tool actually very specifically mentioned that it was for general purpose lanes only. However, I believe there's been some research at the statewide level through Caltrans grants that have basically updated the Duranton and Turner research and said, we're starting to see the same phenomenon for pure HOV lanes. The discussion regarding toll lanes, high occupancy toll lanes, or how we discuss them here at SANDAG as managed lanes, is still probably not applicable for this tool. The tool also mentions that it's limited to urbanized areas only. So again, if we look at kind of the inventory of lane mileage and using the sources of HPMS, it doesn't really add up, really, because at least for our county specifically in our MPO, it's the western third of the county is kind of what we consider urbanized. Population growth is not handled the same way as a regional plan or an SCS. So again, that Duranton and Turner research very much discusses that population growth could be due to induced demand. And so our forecasts and the way that the agency structures a regional plan can't really make that same assumption. We need to use forecasts from the Department of Finance, and that is an administrative requirement. And so there are some limitations to this calculator. And so what we'd like to do is basically take the basis of the calculator and tailor it for application in a sustainable community strategy. So here is an overview of our methodology, and we'll be reviewing this at the end. But there's three main stages that we undertook: data collection, ABM testing, and then actually creating the calculator. The data collection involves actually examining the network that we're using in the plan and those future networks to come up with an inventory of added capacity, that is newly constructed capacity, in the plan for the years between 2016 and 2035, and then between the years of 2036 and 2050. So we looked at the phased project listing that our planning team does put together for every regional plan, and we were able to use those built networks that we input into ABM to itemize and inventory all additional lane mileage on the federal functional classes 1 through 3. And so we'll go into that again. That's the second time I promised that, but we'll be getting into it in the next slide. We then did some testing using ABM 2+, and we performed about 25 to 30 total model runs that examined the effects of added VMT in the model based off of facility type. So there are different facility types. And we also wanted to take into account the policies that can be reflected in the model of the 5 big moves that may reduce VMT. And so we wanted to test both of those effects separately and individually. And it did take quite an iterative approach to do that. And then finally, we used the data collection and ABM testing to come up with a calculator to determine these elasticities that would be appropriate for a regional plan. So to go over the data collection step, one thing that is very different about the tool that we wanted to maintain is to maintain federal functional class. That is a classification that we don't normally use here at SANDAG every day, but it does have use statewide and nationwide as kind of a common convention for determining facility type. And so very generally speaking, Class 1 can be considered the interstate highway system that exists in San Diego. And so that would be Interstate 5, Interstate 8, Interstate 15, and Interstate 805. The Class 2 federal functional class would be all of the state routes that are classified as limited access freeways. So those would be, your freeways such as State Route 163, urbanized State Route 54, urbanized State Route 78, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, the federal functional class 3 would be the non-freeway portion of the state highway system in the region. So State Route 94 from, Steel Canyon High School out to, Jamul and Campo, that would be considered federal functional class 3. So that's how we structured our inventory of lane mileage. And one thing that you don't see on this table is one large component of the 2021 regional plan. So the 2021 regional plan, through its managed lane strategy via the complete corridors component of the 5 big moves, adds about 800 total lane miles of managed lanes to the region over the full course of the plan. The exception to that is just about half of that comes from converting existing general purpose lanes. The conversion of existing general purpose lanes to managed facilities is a brand new concept in our regional plan, and there are not a lot of examples nationwide where that has taken place. So there isn't a whole lot of empirical data or established research that would cover the elasticity of those. And so for that purpose, we did not consider any of that. And we did that to really make this a more conservative approach. Anecdotal thinking would say that if you take a general purpose lane and convert it to a managed lane, that facility will be used less since you're attaching a price and conditions for use. So our test program can be summarized by determining the elasticities in the model for general purpose, managed lanes, auxiliary lanes, and toll lanes. One thing that individuals may not be familiar with is auxiliary lanes. Those are the short lanes that sometimes are placed in between freeway on-ramps and freeway off-ramps that are used for weaving, storage, and other highway operations. Usual guidance from Caltrans is that all auxiliary lanes should be kept to under 1 mile in length. And so again, that really follows the spirit of these are spot projects that are used to hopefully facilitate safety and the efficient running of the facility. We also ran tests to determine the elasticities for managed lanes as well as toll lanes. Very specifically speaking, here is a summary of some of the highlights that we had from our testing. We had many more tests, but we wanted to test an FHWA Class 1 and Class 2 facility. So along Interstate 5, one general purpose lane was added in each direction. And from there, we calculated the elasticity using the elasticity formula. And again, it's important to note that these raw elasticities are different from the asserted elasticity of FHWA Class 1 lanes, which is 1, due to the differences in methodology and time frame. And by time frame, I mean travel demand model forecast versus the two-stage least squares regression model that was used in the Duranton and Turner research. And for FHWA Class 2 and 3 facilities, the corridors that we tested were State Route 52, adding 1 GP lane in each direction between Interstate 5 and State Route 125, and State Route 78, 1 general purpose lane in between Interstate 5 and Interstate 15. And these were all conducted using a 2025 no-build network and no-build policies. After these general purpose elasticities were calculated, tests were conducted to determine the elasticities for managed lanes, auxiliary lanes, and toll lanes along the same corridors. And so for Interstate 5, 1 managed lane was added using the same project extents, along with State Route 72, along State Route 78. For the auxiliary lanes, we only added them in areas that were appropriate. And that inventory of lane mileage was also scaled appropriately. So the denominator for lane miles is not the same between our auxiliary lane tests and our general purpose managed lane or toll lane tests, because those are going to contain more lane mileage. So after these facility-based test results, and after we double-checked everything and we took some averages, we came up with these relative full elasticities by facility type. And so again, this differs from the calculator, and it really does focus in on the concept that we are accepting that a general purpose lane is still going to carry that elasticity of 1 and 0.75 respectively, but we're also going to scale the other not as impactful facility types appropriately to move into the next stage, which is the calculator stage. But before we get to the calculator stage, we wanted to test the policies in the regional plan. So as of the winter of 2021, one policy that was primarily discussed around the plan was the regional road user charge. But there were plenty of other policies in the plan that on their own will seek to reduce VMT, that being the SCS land use. So the mobility hub land use component of the plan focuses growth to more of the urbanized area and infill development, which we know will reduce VMT, not via maybe a lot of mode shifting, but by reducing average trip length. We also have some parking strategies within those mobility hubs that seeks to shift mode away from single auto, or maybe even onto alternative modes of transportation, along with the TDM options and all of the other policies in the plan. Now, we have had to iterate this step when the board did choose to undertake that action in February. We had to recalculate this elasticity by removing the RUC, which obviously affected our initial estimates, which were published in the final regional plan, of about 193,000 additional VMT added to our SB 375 VMT inventory at 2035. So we're recalculating that, and that number is going to go up because of the RUC removal. And just like many other factors that we've discussed at the modeling forum and that you may all have learned through our board meetings about the effects of removing this policy from the plan. And so as of 2022, this month, our VMT reducing elasticity for the policies is about 0.28. So now that we've kind of determined all of our elasticities for the various components of the plan, we needed to put that into a calculator. And in order to kind of calculate that and get that to a point to where we were getting to those final elasticities that you see on the right-hand side of this slide, is that we asserted two big things. And that was that that for forecast applications in a regional plan, the split between short and long run VMT is going to be 50-50. Our calculator is able to accept other values. So if we get feedback or if there's other research that's published that kind of can determine that to be something different, this calculator can easily adapt to that. We also asserted that the transportation model and the growth forecast account for about 50% of long-run induced demand. Again, and that goes back to the discussion of population. And because population for us is an asserted value in the future based off of Department of Finance projections. And so that is one thing that we needed to keep in mind. And our growth forecast does iterate through certain steps that assumes that we're going to have more people and there's going to be more demand for travel, whether the network changes or not. And so the concept starting from the left is going down the y-axis on this table, we see all of our different facility types and our ABM testing relative elasticities that we reviewed before. When you split these elasticities out 50-50, you're basically taking the first column and dividing it by 2. Then we kind of had to determine the percentages of, okay, what does the model account for? Well, we're asserting that it's 50% on the long run side. And when we take the short run elasticity and divide it by that actual elasticity that we got from our ABM testing, we come up with these percentages. So very generally speaking, on that top row, the model is accounting for about 2/3 of short run induced demand on the model for a GP lane. So we're about 1/3 short, and we need to compensate for that at this point in the calculator. The next stage is to basically figure out, okay, what does not get accounted for in a model run? And those are those elasticities that we see kind of just past the center of that slide. And again, that's broken out into short run and long run induced demand. So if you add those two up, that is the total elasticity unaccounted for. But then we have the policies. We know that policies in the plan will seek to reduce VMT, and that's what we found in our policy test runs using ABM2+, where we basically added a ton of general purpose lanes on congested corridors, and the only variable we changed was the policies. So we had one run with no policies and the other one with policies, and what we actually found is that the policies reduce VMT substantially over the run with no policies. And there's actually a slight decrease over even adding no additional capacity and going out into the future and just running with no policies. So again, that value was higher earlier in our analysis. It was that top line 0.281 that you see for a general purpose lane was closer to 0.36 with the RUC. But when the RUC came out, those elasticities were reduced substantially. So those are the final elasticities that we use in our calculator. And so what we use in the calculator is those elasticities multiplied by the change in VMT by facility type. So when we go back to those inventories, that's where we're going to go. So again, going back to that overview, we don't have any results to share right now because our final modeling for the amendment isn't complete yet. But I would say very generally speaking that, when we were at 193, with the RUC, that's probably going to be solidly in the 300s without the RUC. So, we're seeing, about a 50% increase in this additional VMT that we're going to be adding to our SB 375 evaluation. And so let's discuss some of the limitations of our methodology. Again, existing general purpose to manage lane conversions were not considered in this analysis. We don't really consider large changes to exogenous variables like fuel cost, the cost of housing, pandemics, recessions, other factors that can very, very clearly affect travel. And we can't disaggregate by special travel markets. So we know that military households are probably going to respond differently to changes in utility of driving a vehicle more than maybe a tourist will. And commercial vehicle travel have their own considerations. And so again, existing research is only kind of looking at empirical data of travel, but not really by trip type, trip purpose, or special market. And again, we want to emphasize that this is really only applicable right now, at least at our comfort level, for regional planning purposes. I think we would have to do a little bit more research and a little bit more work to see if this is applicable for corridor studies, project level studies, or other studies that may come through the Service Bureau. It's just a little bit too broad right now, I think, for a focused plan like that. I don't think that that is something that should be ignored, and we're not going to deal with it. And there are emerging tools such as CT, MFAC, and other focus tools that can get into project-based analysis, but we don't think that this specific methodology is ready for project-level analysis at the moment. So finally, with some conclusions, that really I want to emphasize again that this is for regional planning, regional plan purposes, and that current induced demand research and tools just aren't really turnkey applications for what we do at the MPO level. And we're going to have that final VMT added as we finish up the modeling here at the end of the calendar year and into January 2023. And I think finally, I'd like to acknowledge a few former staff members at SANDAG, Rick Curry and Nico Beltran specifically, who had a whole lot of input and had a whole lot of work in helping us get this evaluation together. So with that, I think we'll open it up to any questions or comments on really anything that's been presented today. So I will open it up.
Yes. There is Morris's comment.
Okay.
Can we see the chat message?
Yes. Let's see. Or let's say I can go over to.
So I can read it to you.
I can read it. So Maurice from Caltrans comments, elasticities for use in the UC Davis calculator are currently under re-examination by Caltrans. Initial findings from work by Fair and Pierce show that elasticity is too high and that may need to be adjusted to 0.75 instead of 0.1. Further investigation is continuing. Also, one of the major shortfalls of the work by Duranton and Turner is that they did not control for increase in auto ownership relative to the provision of additional lane mileage. And so, yes, I would generally agree with all of that, Maurice, and I think that's why, unlike I think some other components that we've received feedback on, specifically for our regional plan, for those of you that are familiar with kind of the sustainable community strategy process that's occurred in the state since 2008, for our first SCS, a really good example is each MPO was allowed to calculate and apply their own auto operating costs for future years. When ARB and OPR evaluated all of those different methodologies, they decided to kind of go with a more unified standard methodology, at least for all of the big MPOs in the state. I can imagine maybe induced demand may be going in that way because the way that we're calculating it here is going to differ from other MPOs. And that's because other MPOs are going to tailor their analysis, I think, for what they think is most appropriate for their regional plans. And each of these plans are unique and have their own different emphasis and needs that need to be fulfilled. And so we think that this approach is the most appropriate for SANDAG, and we certainly recognize the approaches that other MPOs and other lead agencies have taken to do that. So again, this is very much an ongoing, I think, area of research and work that we're going to be undertaking. And I think we're very well positioned to adapt to any changes that may take place between now and the 2025 regional plan. We have any other hands up or comments?
So Joaquin, let me just add kind of my thought on this. Thank you for the nice work. So not only you did a thorough analysis, but we submit to CARB. So right. So it's well accepted. And as you mentioned that as the VMT change, every time we run a model, we have to update the calculator. But it's set up in a way that is, so it's systematic and streamlined. So I'm glad to see that. So talk about induced demand, right? So I think eventually a more elegant solution is to have a fully integrated land use model and transmission model, right? So that, it has to be bi-directional kind of connection between these two pieces, right? So right now, we take the land use inputs into ABM, right? For example, the population, households, and employment, school enrollment at MDRA level, in the microzone level, into our ABM model, okay, to tell the model where the trip demand is coming from and where the trip are attracted to, right? To the attraction side is largely decided by the employment and school enrollment, and there are other factors as well, right? So, but that's only one side of the story, right? On the other side of the story is that the information produced from ABM should also influence the decision of where people choose to work and live, right? Meaning, so the time, speed, and distance, even cost information generated from ABM, right, should be fed into the land use model to inform where the population should be, where their house location should be, even where they choose to work, right? I think one of the reasons I think we have to do this exercise now is because the limitation of the feeding back from ABM to land use model is not there yet. So I've been talking to our land use modelers a lot. So in our next RP, 2025 RP, it is going to be, we close the loop, the entire loop. It's not half loop. So just want to add some comments there. So.
Thank you, Wu. Okay, I think we'll have maybe one last call for any comments or questions. Can we go to the next? Can we go to the next slide manually? Oh, no worries, no worries. Or maybe it got cut off. I don't know. Oh, all right. So I think that is going to conclude our forum for today. Our next modeling forum is going to be in summer 2023. Once we're able to get that date secured, we will notify you all. And we'd like to thank you all for your attendance today via Zoom. We did have cookies in the back for anybody that attended in person, but I'm sure the modeling team will help us lighten the load on that. I also want to acknowledge the SANDAG production staff today that helped us. They really make these available to you all via Zoom, and we are very thankful for their hard work and expertise in making today successful. So thank you very much. Happy holidays, and we hope to see you in the summer.
Thank you, Joaquin. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you everyone on the room. Yeah.
Yes. Can you just ask them if you feel please email? And then my email is just j@sandag.org.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate it. Nimish, great stuff. Oh, no problem.
Yeah, we're fine.
No problem. Well, yeah, you know, you guys gotta serve the varsity. You got to use the big gym today. I'm glad.
Your camera's great.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
okay,
Why
so-
we
yeah.
don't have as many?
Well, I know like Rick and Mike were planning on coming, and then like a coworker of Rick's tested positive for
Oh,
COVID, so they
no.
like shut their office down, and then
Oh, no.
I think Mike, I think he has some sick kids or something like that.
Did you?
Yes.
Oh,
Normally get it close to 80 or 90 people, right? So,
You're gonna stop the recording? I think the recording is still on, yeah.
thank you for.
Yeah. Thanks.
Cleaned up out here, and then on the top.